This is the Sexuality and Fetish Podcast with Mistress Harley, where you can learn all about fetishes and sexuality. I believe that sexuality and sexual freedom are an inherent part of intellectual freedom, and that the ability to explore and express your sexuality safely and consensually is a human right. Hello, perverts. Welcome back to the Sexuality and Fetish Podcast with the one and only Mistress Harley. I have enticed a special guest today, fabulous horror host Joe Bob Briggs. Please introduce yourself to the ignorant masses, Joe Bob.
I'm Joe Bob. I don't know what to say. Um, I'm currently doing a show on Shudder called The Last Drive-In, and you helped us out with that because for our Valentine's show this year, we did the like fetishes that you may not have heard of before,
Yes,
and you were one of them. Your financial domination fetish
that's
was
right.
was a new one for me, FinDom. That was new for me, and of course Darcy, the mail girl, was there, and I asked her, why don't why doesn't everyone do this? and
Yes.
and she was explaining, oh no, you have to really know what you're doing to do this.
You really do.
I'm
It's not
impressed.
as easy as saying, just give me money. I mean, otherwise, everyone would.
Right, but tell me your secret. What is your secret?
um, I have a master's degree in library science and information technology, a bachelor's degree in history with a minor in theology, and I'm a keen student of sociology, economics, and the human condition. And I also have huge breasts, and so I've weaponized that in the format of capitalism that we all live in.
You've weaponized your breasts.
I
I'm all for
mean,
that.
it's a well known fact, Joe Bob Briggs, that men are completely obsessed with breasts. And you actually cued me onto that when I was watching TV. And I remember you used to be like in bed with girls from Penthouse, watching horror movies with them. And eventually you started counting all the breasts in a movie, even if it was five breasts, so not a full breast. And I really started to notice that breasts have power over men. And with that knowledge, I became like Lex Luthor and made myself into a supervillain.
Okay, well, you did a good job of it because those are awesome breasts, and I can see how you use them to your best advantage.
Why, thank you. Thank you. They are unavoidable. But that leads me to a question I have for you. You long ago talked about a love interest of yours, Wanda Bodine. What did she do to break your heart? Did she have fabulous breasts?
Wanda Bodine, Wanda Bodine had average breasts. She had typical breasts, but she was in the early days of my. I started out as a newspaper columnist, and I started a column in the '80s called "Joe Bob Goes to the Drive-In" in the Dallas Times Herald, and the first half of the column would be um, my personal life, and the second half of the column would be the movie. And my personal life always occurred at the drive-in, and so a number of females came through the storylines that went with the reviews to the movies. Um, by the way, sometimes I look back at those articles and I just cringe. It's, you shouldn't read things you wrote that long ago. Anyway, Wanda Bodine was a hairdresser and capitalist and hooker, and sometime girlfriend of mine. And so she would appear uh, pretty regularly in the columns. I was usually trying to get rid of her. Uh, but yeah, everyone remembers Wanda Bodine. Not so many people remember Vida Stegall, who had the big breasts. Vida Stegall
Oh,
had the biggest breasts of all the girls that I knew in those days. Um, But
And you
um,
surely remember her.
well, Vida was the property of Lute Fenwick, who owned the Western Auto, and Lute was proprietary about who talked to Vida Stegall, but she
Oh.
would sometimes sneak out at night and go her own way. But there was a whole pantheon of women in the early days of my column.
There certainly was, with all your smoldering looks and big cowboy hats and large shoes. What is your shoe size, Joe Bob?
That would be an 11D.
Oh, that's a extra wide, isn't it?
I guess it is. I don't know. They always say I need to tell them the D when I get the shoes.
It's extra wide, I
What are
know.
your now? What are your what is your size?
I wear a 9.5 women's US, which I think is like a 34 EU. I can never keep track, but the foot perverts, they keep track for me.
Okay.
But most of your personal life did happen at the drive-in in those columns. Was
Yes.
there a favorite sexual position to do at the drive-in? Was there a best to drive-in for sex?
Every sexual position at the drive-in is uncomfortable, unless you have a hippie van, and I never owned a hippie van.
VW
And,
bus, yes.
and in fact, a lot of times the vans were not allowed in the drive-in because they obstructed the view of everybody behind them. So, but favorite position at the drive-in, that um, it would have to be cowboy or
Not
cowgirl.
cowgirl.
Cowgirl. I guess cowgirl would have to be the main position because you could do that anywhere in the car.
I think cowboy is where you keep the hat and the bolo tie on. I'm going to assume that that's you.
And only the hat and the bolo tie and
Oh
the boots.
my. I can picture it, and audience, I hope you are picturing it now. So, I have to ask, of course, there is a intrinsic Venn diagram of overlap between BDSM power exchange, sex, horror movies, and science fiction for some reason. And I noticed that on your show, I asked you, what is your favorite kinky horror movie? And I listed several of mine, but you did not answer my question.
Favorite kinky horror movie? I would say, well, the original Hellraiser, is that on your list?
Oh, yes, I have such sights to show you. It's
Yes,
extremely kinky.
very kinky. And let's see, what else? What else would I? Um, uh, what was the? Oh my God, what was the David Bowie movie?
The
Uh,
Hunger.
The Hunger. Yes, I would say The Hunger is on the list.
The Hunger is one of mine as well. So
Okay,
sexy, so David Bowie, so
thank you.
vampire.
Yeah, I would put Cemetery Man on the list.
Oh, I love that one too.
That's
That's
very
such a good
kinky.
one.
Yeah, very kinky because you know it's never clear whether the sex is going on between living people or dead people, one living person and one dead person,
And it's
or
got a lot
something.
of weird imagery, super surreal, sexual, sensual imagery, and you're not sure what is sex in this world, in this universe.
Exactly, but there's a lot of sex in that world and that universe.
So
Um,
much.
I don't know what else is on your list.
Well, I was very influenced by, yes, Hellraiser, by Cemetery Man. I'm trying to think of other really kinky horror movies. I hate to admit, but films like Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, I would love to remake that as a Jewish revenge movie, kind of like Inglorious Bastards, but Jewish lady torturing Nazis. My family is from Romania, the Hungarian part of Romania, so Beszélt Magyar, and I would love to be a Romanian Jew torturing the shit out of some Nazis, but also sexually. So I think I've gone on about that probably enough. But there's an interesting correlation that I always wanted to ask you because censorship in horror movies is very real. Censorship in porn is very real. And in the last decade or so, there's been a war against porn from the Christian right wing. I've given interviews in Vice and Playboy about this. But ultimately, they are censoring so much in pornography that horror movies are actually less censored than porn at this point in time today. I want to ask what you think about that.
Well, America was founded by Puritans, and we have been puritanical for all of our history. And we always cared more about sex than we cared about violence.
Facts.
The two staples of movies, sex and violence. Or, if you hate the movie, you say it's full of sex and violence. If you like the movie, you say it's full of romance and adventure. Right. But it's uh, we were always really hard on sex, and Europe was always really hard on violence.
Yes.
A lot of like Charles Bronson pictures and things got banned in Scandinavia. At the same time, we were banning Swedish pictures because they had, you know, explicit sex in them. We're talking about back in the 70s,
Oh,
and
sure.
and then uh, porn when porn started to really take off in the 80s, there was a feminist outcry against porn.
I
Uh,
remember that.
that's turned around. Feminism now embraces most feminists. I would say fourth wave, what they call fourth wave feminism, embraces porn and embraces sex work as empowering women. But in the early '80s, it was considered. I actually, some of my live shows were picketed by the National Organization for Women, and I got into tiffs with them in various ways. I used to perform at this music club. It was actually I was the only non-musician that ever performed there. But there's this club called Wolfgangs in North Beach in San Francisco, and
I know that one.
and there were pickets. There would always be pickets, feminist pickets, because I was endorsing these movies that they thought were demeaning to women. The one that really made them mad was Pieces, about a serial killer who collects body parts of women as he's trying to build the perfect woman.
But Silence of
And
the Lambs was fine.
well, this was pre-Silence of the Lambs, so I don't know what they would have thought about that. But um, I I just wrote about this recently. Carol Doda, if you know who Carol Doda was,
Yes.
she was the first topless dancer in
Fully
America,
topless in San
fully
Francisco.
topless. Yeah, with no pasties or anything, and she became famous for that. And when she heard that I was being picketed, I was at the slum end of Columbus Avenue, and she was at the high roller end where the swell people go to the nightclubs. And when she heard, she sent her representative down to invite me to go to her show and then spend the day with her. And so and as a way to just sort of say, "Hey, I know what you're doing, and these women are wrong, and I'm on your side. I'm not on their side." And that was I really appreciated that at the time. Um, Carol was known for her, as you are, Mistress Harley. She was known for her at what she called Twin Peaks. And my regret is that she said before you leave town, we have to go up to the Twin Peaks and get a picture of my Twin Peaks on the Twin Peaks.
Aha.
And we ran out of time, and I never got the picture. But she was a wonderful lady and sort of ahead of her time in
Absolutely.
the
She
way
was
she
an
thought about
icon.
sexuality. She thought of her nude dancing as empowering, and she thought of it as freeing. And she was actually pissed that they banned bottomless dancing. She
Right.
could only be topless. they won that in court. But then when bottomless, she wanted to be bottomless too. And when that came up in the courts, the censors won.
I think the current law in San Francisco is that you can do full nude, but there may not be alcohol of any kind on the
Exactly.
premises.
Yeah.
And if there is alcohol, topless only.
Right. They always use the alcohol beverage laws. Exactly.
Yes.
And as you know, most of those clubs can't make money unless they can sell drinks. So,
Of course,
um,
but the ladies can make money. And this is an interesting counter to that kind of feminism where now men are too accustomed, too entitled to seeing women, the internet, porn, horror. They see women's everything. They feel like they should get to see it all. And so I am a withholding cunt. And because I am withholding of my fabulous assets, that actually makes men more slavey and sycophantic. So I found a different spin on it, but I do not judge. I never judge the ladies that do what makes them feel empowered.
okay. So I didn't know that about you. So you're never totally nude.
Never. They don't deserve
Oh,
it.
okay. All right.
And that's about my value. In a supply and demand economy, if men give me thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars to hang out in a bikini and read books, then why should I get fully naked for people for $10, $20? So I do have a nudity clause. I will appear fully nude for $1 million cash.
Really?
Why
So
not? I like
so
money.
sooner or later, somebody's gonna do that. And then where are you gonna appear fully nude?
I mean, that really depends on who pays for it, doesn't it?
Oh, okay. So just for that one person, you'll be fully nude.
Yes, I would consider that an exclusive because, again, why should all of the broke losers on the Twitters and the internet and the haters, people who are only going to complain that they didn't get to see more, why should they get anything when they haven't compensated me for my time? If anything, commercialism and the economy has told me that supply and demand economics dictates value. Therefore, if someone pays me $1 million to see me nude, the next person should have to pay me too.
Okay. Well, good for you.
I,
I'm on your side. I'm on your team.
I've already
Actually,
made millions of dollars, so it's working.
actually, there's a trade organization for the strip clubs of America, and I don't remember the name of it, but I'm going to be their keynote speaker at their convention this year,
How fabulous!
and it should be interesting. It's going to be in Dallas in August, but uh, these clubs, uh, but most of them are topless clubs, as you pointed out. Some of them are all nude clubs, but they probably spend, I don't know, $1 billion a year on lawyers. I mean, they just like are constantly hassled, and city councils try to run them out of town wherever they open up,
Of
and
course.
so many of these. The good thing about them is that in recent years the dancers have sort of gotten their act together in terms of um, what rights they have and how they're,
Unions.
yeah, and the owners are sort of okay with that because what they like is certainty, organization, certainty. When I talk to them, they're always frustrated because, for example, people will always say, "Oh, these clubs they breed crime." They breed crime. That's why we have to shut them down. And so they say, okay, I tell you what we can do in order to not breed crime. I will staff security at the club with only off-duty cops. Only
Hey.
off-duty cops. So it's a person that can actually make an arrest if anything
Mm-hmm.
goes wrong there. And then the city will pass a law saying the off-duty cops can't work at the strip clubs.
Of course.
And so they are really a persecuted minority in our country. I mean, they make enough money to stay in business, and a lot of them make a whole lot of money. But it's interesting that we're so determined. We spend so much time trying to shut down sex wherever it appears. So, and in that case, not just sex, but exhibitionism. So
Yes. And it's incredible that the Christian right has managed, they realize that they cannot get to it through government. They cannot lobby the Supreme Court to stop pornography. That didn't work in the 70s. It didn't work with Frank Zappa. It's not going to work today. But what they realized is that through private industry, they can do the government's dirty work. So if Visa MasterCard bans certain words from their terms of use, then how can you operate in the modern world if people can't use credit cards? I myself have my own merchant processing agreement because I don't want to go through a platform like OnlyFans that takes 20 to 30 to 40% of my money. I want my customers to be able to put my money in my hand. But as I work with Visa MasterCard, there are certain words that they cannot tolerate in their terms of use. But these are things that appear in horror movies all the time. I will make a list: human blood, rape, incest, murder, menstruation, even certain sex acts. You cannot reference hypnosis, mind control, mesmerization, as if hypnosis is a real thing I could make someone do through the computer. Can I? It doesn't matter. It's illegal because Visa MasterCard. But it's in like every horror movie.
you're saying that if you talk about these things or mention them, that you'd lose your credit card privileges?
That's right, including words like blackmail. Game of Thrones has every single illegal sexual fetish in it that Visa MasterCard will allow HBO. They can do it fine, but you cannot do it in pornography. And this, of course, brings into the age old question: does the intent of the artist matter? Are you telling me people aren't masturbating to Game of Thrones?
I'm sure people are. I'm sure people are masturbating to Leave It to Beaver. So,
Exactly.
well, that's interesting. So you have your own credit card system that's outside the normal avenues.
It's not outside the normal avenues. I have the exact same merchant relationship with Visa MasterCard as other high risk adult industry businesses. They
Okay.
used to work with Pornhub, and I screamed from the rafters for years: why is Pornhub allowed to use PayPal when no other sex worker is allowed to? It's against their terms of use. PayPal will shut down and take your money right out of your account. But Pornhub was allowed to use it for years until the Christian right was like, hey, Pornhub, why don't you follow the law? And Pornhub is now a dead company and you have to pay in crypto. So I take crypto, I take Visa MasterCard, I take stocks, I take bonds, I take real estate. You can even sign a debt contract agreement with me that's a legally binding contract for services rendered, as if I fixed your house, that says you owe me a certain amount of money on a payment plan. And you also can sign a stipulated judgment that says if I have to sue you in court, you have already agreed that you are a loser. So I have come up with a lot of really creative ways to make sure that men can give me their money as they desire to do.
That's wonderful. That's
Why should
wonderful.
why should Visa MasterCard get in the way?
All right. Well, you've got it down. You have FinDom down.
Oh, certainly. When you talk to those ladies at the symposium, remind them about alternate payment methods and direct payment, because I know those clubs take a big cut too. I've never been a dancer. I don't like to leave my house. So I know those girls work really hard and those clubs take a cut.
Yes, I think they do it in various ways, um, but um, but you're correct. But they mostly run on alcohol.
That too, as
Yeah.
do a lot of industries. Now, I want to steal some questions from inside the actor's studio. What
Okay.
turns you on?
What turns me on? Well, movies turn me on. It's like
Movies are great.
that's I've made my life sort of revolve around movies, and I don't regret it in the least. But also, books turn me on. Before I was into movies, I was into books. I'm still into books, and um, I'm always looking for um, I'm always looking for cheap paperbacks I can turn into movies, and
Ooh,
and
I
because
have ideas.
oh, you do?
I'm
Okay.
I'm a voracious reader. Why else would you get a master's degree in library science? And of course, I've read a lot of John Bloom's books. Do you know him?
I do know him. Yes, he writes very serious books. But
I loved eccentric orbits around iridium satellites, and
did
ever
you
since
read
I read
Eccentric
it,
Orbits? Wow.
yes, ever since I read it, I can't stop thinking about how to get rich from iridium because I feel like no one is exploiting it now.
Um, Iridium's doing just fine. You can buy the Iridium stock on the stock exchange. But
Ooh, that's good to know.
yeah, um, and
I'm
yes,
going to
and
buy a bunch of iridium.
it is still to this day the only cell phone that works on every inch of the planet. You can be in the Amazon rainforest and call somebody in Siberia. Doesn't matter where you are on the planet, the phone works. Um,
I'm a
and
world traveler. I've been places where there are no phones, no sat phones, no nothing. And I ran out of bug spray in the middle of the Amazon. So I could have really used one of those.
yeah, there are a lot of people now who won't go anywhere without them, and they've saved lives all over the world.
So
So
growth market then.
yeah, um, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Excellent. I like to know that. That's I'm always interested in interesting investments. So I know you go to a lot of horror conventions and do meet and greets. I have been to mostly science fiction conventions, and they're always full of crazy sex parties. Are horror conventions like that?
I don't, they may be. I don't. They don't invite me if they if they're having those. Um, there's a big difference though between a sci-fi convention and a horror convention. I've done both. Sci-fi conventions tend to be a lot more upscale than
Agree.
the horror conventions. Um, you have a lot more people from the suburbs, from the really nice suburbs, um, and horror conventions. You have a lot more bikers. You have a lot more um, sort of, I don't know what you would call them. You have rednecks, and,
The
and
Scotch Irish, Joe Bob.
yes, and that's my heritage, and so I get along fine. You have more tattoos at the horror convention than you do at the sci-fi convention. Just it's more of an outlaw genre.
That's
Uh,
true.
horror is more of an outlaw genre, and so you get people who either are outlaws or they like to be outlaws on the weekend.
I really enjoy the crossover of sci-fi and horror. Those are some of my favorites. I would argue that Hellraiser, which is about an interdimensional species of beings, is science fiction, but also movies like Event Horizon, where the guy from Jurassic Park rips out his own eyeballs. I love that shit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could say anything that has a little supernatural element is you know sci-fi horror. Um, I really think that the people who founded the Sci-Fi Channel, whenever that was, late '80s, early '90s, um, I think if they had it to do over, they would have called that the Horror Channel. I think
Ooh,
because
that's true.
at a certain point, they started showing horror all the time and less sci-fi, more and more horror. But of course, they launched it at the time that Star Trek was at its peak of
Oh,
popularity, and so
it's true.
and so these services that have come along, like Shutter and Screambox and others, um, uh, took advantage of the fact that horror started to take off. It started to surpass sci-fi. I would say around 2010, something like that, and it hit its peak in 2016 when The Shape of Water won the Academy Award.
Great movie.
That's a rubber suit monster movie.
And also a kinky movie. Is
Yes,
fish
a very
sex
kinky movie.
inter is like your fish sex man stuff, is that bestiality? Is
Yeah,
that what is that?
I don't know, but I think once a movie like that wins the Academy Award, then a lot of people who have in Hollywood who have never thought about horror before are writing checks now make me a horror movie. And so
Absolutely.
it really, lit a fire under horror projects.
And
And
sci-fi had great success with Z Nation after The Walking Dead, and I watched both, and I loved Z Nation because it was kind of funny.
because it was more like kill, kill, kill.
No, because it was more realistic in the gallows humor of life. People who've experienced extreme trauma in war discuss that there's still humor there. In Studs Terkel's oral history of World War II, the Good War, he finds that even in death camps, even in the trenches, people were joking with each other. And I find that horror that's too serious, that doesn't have at least like, okay, I'll see you when we're dead. Like, it's just not even realistic to me.
Yeah, no, I think that is true. Back when I was a journalist, um, I did a couple of projects that where my life was in danger, and so and you would be with people, who are going through it with you, and it's true, um, you become kind of giddy in situations that are terrifying, and you know, maybe we shouldn't talk about it. You also become very sexual.
Oh, really? No, talk about
Yeah.
it.
No, it becomes sort of it becomes sort of an aphrodisiac. The fact that you might die today, and so you know you don't know what you're gonna feel until that happens. You know.
So, did you experience the fear boner of war? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, not war so much, but yes, but but uh, but but yeah, it makes you horny. There's something about it makes you horny.
Oh,
You know.
all right. Well, everybody, there's war everywhere in the world right now. Head to Israel, the Ukraine, Belarus. I mean, there's a lot of places to get horny. That's incredible. I always love oral histories. And so, of course, with a history degree, I read a lot of histories. And it's always those wartime histories that bring out every facet of human beings. And so, when you take that into movies, realistically, you think, nah, you can't just be Rick all the time in the zombie apocalypse. Like, you gotta crack at least one joke about your dumb shoes or your stupid hat or whatever. Like, anything.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But I think they did that in Walking Dead, don't you think?
I
I
feel
just
like
thought it was too serious.
Z
Yeah.
Nation took the Walking Dead theme and was like, what if it was way more funny?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But could you beat Leonard Maltin in a fight?
I think so. Yes.
I agree. I'd put my money on you. Now, I do ask everybody on this podcast, what was the gayest thing you've ever done?
The gayest thing I've ever done.
I'll tell you, I let a girl eat me out and I did not return the favor.
Now, why do you call that gay? Why did you not return the favor?
Because I was being a selfish bitch.
And you think that's a gay trait to be a selfish bitch?
No, it was that I let her eat my pussy. See, I gave her a gift.
Oh, okay. What's the gayest thing? I mean, I guess the gayest thing would be, probably, 3 or 4 times I've dressed in drag, just
Yay! I want pictures.
at a party or for a show or something. But that's about as gay as I've ever gotten.
You're a person that's not afraid to express their feminine side, and that's a quality. Iggy Pop once said that he did not find it humiliating to dress as a woman because there's nothing humiliating about being a woman.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
So, you are a journalist and I am a researcher. I have a book about films where there is an image from a film I cannot identify. I've contacted the author and the publisher and the image provider, and no one knows. If I send you a picture, could you identify it for me?
I'll try. What
Ooh,
movie is?
exciting.
You don't know what movie it is.
I don't know what movie. It's in a book about blaxploitation films and pornography, and there's just a still image and there's no caption. And the author said the publisher put it in. The publisher said they got it from a image provider, like a Getty Images, but it wasn't Getty. And then they don't know where the film is from, but it's obviously a still from a film, and it's made me crazy. So I'm gonna send it to you.
Okay.
And sex with food, yay or nay?
I've never had sex with food. It's never appealed to me.
Not even a little whipped cream on the nips or nothing?
No, I've never done that. I
Okay.
maybe it would. You know,
It would
I don't know.
interfere with the hat and the bolo tie, I imagine.
Probably get me dirty.
Yes. And when are all of your books being reprinted?
Well, that's a good question. I've just signed a contract with Dark Horse,
Oh, I
which
love them.
which is known for their comics, mostly known for their
Yes.
comics, but they also do books. And Dark Horse is going to do two. I'm going to do two books. We're going to reprint Joe Bob Goes to the Drive-In, which is my original reviews.
A classic.
Wanda Bodine figures prominently in that book. And then we're going to do a 50th anniversary book that's the entire backstory of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And
Oh,
so,
exciting.
and so uh, I have been writing about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for years. I've interviewed every single person who was in the cast or the crew of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and so this will just be the definitive making of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre book.
Oh, exciting. I'm excited for that. I do enjoy reading, and you listeners listening now, read a goddamn book. Start with Joe Bob. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you'll learn a thing. That would be exciting. I guess I have to ask, do you have any favorite porno movies? Any classics like Deep Throat?
Um, well, I mean, the the only porno movies where you can say, you know, this would be a favorite of mine would be the ones from the 70s, the original ones, because after the 70s, most porn just became a series of scenes loosely
Yes.
connected, the name of a fetish. Um, but probably Insatiable was a good
Okay.
one. New Wave Hookers. You remember New Wave
Ooh,
Hookers?
I haven't seen that, but it's going on my list now.
These are like the early days when porn was done in 35 millimeter, and these were films that were they they were occasionally trying they were trying to do what made porn acceptable was Deep Throat, and when Deep Throat came out, people went to the movies with as couples. It was a couples thing, and so for a while, the porn industry was trying to make couples porn movies, movies that respectable couples could go and see, and so they made one called The Opening of Misty Beethoven, and there were some others like that, and those were pretty much the highlights of porn, and then
That's when they
along
were
that.
being called marital aids,
Yeah,
right?
and then as soon as VHS, well, and then before that, you had in the early days of porn, before you could show penetration, uh, they had these films that started in Sweden, Denmark, Scandinavian countries, where you'd have a guy in a white lab coat in front of a blackboard with a pointer, and he would be talking about the sexuality of women, and
Educational
then
films.
they would educate you about how a woman has an orgasm and how a woman and you would have a series of scenes where with the professor explaining how those work. Those are hysterical. Those
I
are
love
really
those
funny.
ones.
Yeah, but that would be like I don't know, late '60s, early '70s. That very early porn.
Scientists are still trying to figure out how to teach men how to learn to give women an orgasm.
Yeah. How's that going?
Well, the Japanese have invented some incredible tools like the Hitachi magic wand, but so many men are insecure about their own abilities or, size comparisons. So ultimately, it's still not working. We are still working on that, the scientists of America. But I am now going to look up some of those films because I haven't watched all of them. But I did love those old educational movies where it's like, this is a woman's breast. They mention nothing about feeding a child or, just a breast. Did anything ever get saucy with you and some of those porn stars on the set back in the day? You guys were in bed.
Um, well, we were in bed, but we were on a set. I mean, we were, you
Just like
know,
porn.
we were surrounded by we were surrounded by a crew, and producers. Um, n- yeah, um, we had an actress, and I won't embarrass her.
No, no names.
I won't give her name, but uh, she 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 came on to be interviewed. She was a scream queen, and she came on to be interviewed, and she was sitting next to me, and the director walked all the way from the booth out to the set, and he goes, "Joe Bob, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you." And I kind of walked off the side of the set, and he says, um, "We can see everything between her legs, everything." And he says, "Do you want to talk to her, or you want me to talk to her?" And I said, I'll take care of it." And so I say, you need to either cross your legs or, change skirts or whatever because they blah, 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 blah. And she says, okay. And so we start the interview again. He comes back out and he says, oh no, it's even worse now.
Ah!
And so, and so I said, something is wrong here. And I talked to her again, and she looks over at her boyfriend who was with her on the set, and she says, "I told you they wouldn't let us do that."
Ah!
So,
That is saucy.
anyway,
I like that story. I feel like there's more stories, but I might need to get them out of you privately. Did you put on those handcuffs I sent you?
did I put them on? I have yet to put them on. You know, um, but if you want me to put them on, I will.
Oh, I
I'll,
like
I'll
that
try anything.
answer.
I'll
They
try
have
anything.
they have the little quick release on there, so you're totally safe. I kind of expected maybe you would put them on and then read the letter, but I can't control everything from my house. I was going to ask if you were top or bottom, but you just said you'd do anything I wanted, so I already know. I kind of wish I had more to keep you here. Do you like Tony Horowitz, Studs Terkel? Who's your favorite historical author?
Historical author? Oh man, that's a tough one. You mean an actual historian, a person who
Yes,
writes history?
nonfiction.
Um, hmm.
Don't say Dan Brown. That's not real.
I would have to say Truman Capote, um,
Ah, excellent.
because of In Cold Blood. I mean, I think In Cold Blood created a whole new genre. Truman Capote invented a new genre, which is the true crime novel, and I wrote one of those myself, Evidence of Love. Uh, that came out in the
Yes.
80s and has been made into a movie. Well, it was made into a TV movie, then it was made into a uh, Hulu series, and it was made into a HBO Max series. Um, and
You write for Women Who Kill, right?
Right, for women who kill, no, but
Oh,
I
okay.
read about women who kill.
There's a show. I love all those true crime A&E shows like Women Who Kill and
I
Evil
do
Next
too.
Door.
Women are more interesting killers than men, um, because they usually don't use a gun.
Too
Women
loud.
are women are great poisoners.
Yes.
Men don't have time to figure out poison.
They are busy. Yeah, it's true. Men are really lazy. They're the fastest direction to whatever impulse they have, sex,
That's right.
violence. But women are premeditated.
That's true. That's true. That's what makes those shows great is that uh, the level of planning that they have for a lot of those men, especially those women who go through husbands.
Oh,
You know,
yes,
who
the Black Widows.
kill all their husbands. They're on the fifth one before they get caught.
Well, men just die. They have heart attacks. What can we do?
Yeah, I like those shows too, though.
I
I
like the
mean,
ones about women who kill their children because I made a
yeah.
conscious choice not to
Ooh.
have children. I like drugs, sex, and rock and roll. So when I watch those shows about women who kill their children and they're like, I just couldn't stand the crying anymore, I'm like, yeah, girl, I get that.
Oh wow, yeah, those are rough. Those are yeah, those are some of the most um, and if you get convicted of that, juries will not forgive you.
Oh, of course not.
You're spending the rest of your life in prison, or you're going straight to death row.
That's right. And we all know the gayest stuff happens in prison.
Yes, we do.
Well, Joe Bob, I unfortunately am out of inquisitive things to torment you with, but I guess I'll ask you, do you want to ask me anything?
Well, what is it? How big are your breasts? What is the
Ha,
size of your breasts?
I'm a 30 double K.
30 double K.
Yes,
30
and
double
so
K. I've never heard of it.
30 30
So,
is the rib cage size around in
right?
inches. And then the way you get bra size is you do a measurement around the bust and subtract the bust from the rib cage, and then that number is the cups.
So the letters are more important than the numbers,
Absolutely. So this means there is a 20-inch differential between my rib cage and my bust.
and hence your popularity with millions of men all around the world who send you money.
It's true. Although when I started, I was only like a C cup, but I also know how to get inside the minds of men, torment them just enough to make them want more, and never give them what they truly want. And that makes them sycophants and simps, and I farm them. I'm a little simp farmer.
Wow. And they stay
Yeah.
a long time. They keep doing that for a long time.
Oh, yes. I have slaves who've been with me for over a decade now who have tattoos of my logos, who wear my t-shirts. I'm a celebrity who doesn't have to show up or go anywhere, just to my fans. And that's enough. You only need 10,000 fans to give you $5 every day to be rich.
Wow. Okay. I wish I knew how to do that, but I don't.
Breast implants
And-
are a good start.
okay.
Drag. Yeah.
Are there male findoms?
Okay, there are some gay male findoms because I've never met a female fin sub, meaning women don't pay for this shit. But sometimes gay men will try. But the problem is, it's not a commodity. It's not hard to find a gay man who will pretty much do whatever you want. But a withholding woman, now, that's actually a thing that happens in real life, but you never get exactly the way you want.
Okay. All right. So there's no, but an extremely good-looking gay man who's a withholding man. You're saying he might have a stable of slaves.
Maybe, but do men even know how to be withholding? They're such instant gratification, failure to impulse control animals.
I don't know. You could set up a school for gay men to teach them how to do that.
Quite frankly, I think the gender dynamics of America need a reversal. And so, if women learn how to manipulate men, take them for all they're worth, I just do what men do. I learned from male CEOs and male rappers. My first album was a rap album about financial domination because it was the only place I knew I wouldn't be censored. I knew that in rap, just as the ODB could rap about pimping out women, I could rap about all the horrible things I do to men, and no one will censor me in that genre and format.
I see. All right.
Rule
Well,
number one, never let him come. When his dick gets hard, his brain gets dumb. I'm trying to teach him, Joe Bob.
Okay. Well, I'm sure I'll see you in the future, Mistress Harley, because you're now part of the Awesome Pod, right?
Yes, yes, on
The
the
Awesome Pod,
AEW Awesome
the
Wrestling
AEW Awesome
Podcast.
Pod. Um,
Yes.
so and so I'm sure we'll cross paths in the future because occasionally I go on there. And so I was talking to Darcy Diana Prince, who's on the pod with you,
Of course, one of my
um,
friends, yes.
and I pointed out that that video they released of uh, CM Punk
Oh, yes,
last
yes.
week, that wasn't much of a fight.
No,
Wasn't much of a fight at all.
it it was one man pushing another man over and then a third large Samoan man coming in to save the tiny man. Yes.
Exactly. And it was all over in about 10 seconds, right?
It was. Just like most male performances. Yes.
And I was like, wow, I thought that it had to be something like really dangerous to get fired over. And
No, it's all just insider baseball. If you push someone backstage, not in the ring, that's a crime of assault. Just like if you forcibly penetrate someone backstage without a camera, that's a rape. But if you do it in front of a camera with everybody watching and you're all there on purpose, then you are making a movie.
yeah, okay. All right, I guess so. Anyway, she was saying that that I needed to come on to the Ausum pod and talk
Yes.
about it. So maybe we'll be talking about it this next week.
I believe that Darcy and I can lure you to a wrestling podcast. I believe in our powers of persuasion.
Okay.
But it was my pleasure to interview you, Joe Bob Briggs, and I watch The Lost Drive-In every week when it airs every week on Fridays on Shudder. So thank you for accompanying me today.
All right. Thank you. This was wonderful.
My pleasure.